Hello, and welcome to another episode of Teaching with Inquiry Live. Tonight, my question is, if you and I taught at the same school, would we be teacher BFFs? And I know that sounds really strange, but I find that with so many teachers now online and the amount of communities that are started online with groups of teachers, whether or not some of those communities are enormous and you get lost in the shuffle because you can never find the thread you're looking for, or whether or not you have found multiple people and you're just not sure which community really speaks to you. I find that being part of a teacher community with other like-minded people that get you and share some of the same philosophies help you as a teacher. Sometimes we might not always be surrounded by people that teach exactly like that. Sometimes we're in really small schools. And sometimes we might have teaching partners that are absolutely fantastic, but they teach in a completely separate language than you do. And that makes it sometimes really hard to have that really tight-knit, close relationship with people where you can bounce ideas off of one another and share ideas with one another. So my question for you is, would we be BFFs if we did teach together? So it's been 83 episodes since I've been doing Teaching with Inquiry Live, and it's been 7 years since I have started my website and blogging, some years more regular than others, but I'm not quite sure if I have really sat down and gone through exactly who I am as a teacher and who it is that you're spending your time watching on Monday nights at 9 or purchasing their resources and really understanding whether or not would you be part of my community? Are you a part of my community? So I'm going to start off with letting you know that I do have a community on Facebook, and that is, you can find a general one where we're just talking about teaching with inquiry, but I also have my Madly Learning Insiders Club. So if after tonight's video you think, yeah, I think this girl and I would be BFFs, and I think her and I have similar teaching styles, I would love for you to join me if you're not already a member of our Madly Learning Insiders Club so that we can build a strong community together of like-minded individuals. So I'm going to get started and share with you a little bit about who I am as a teacher, my philosophy behind what drives me, and how this whole thing I do every week kind of got started so that you can get to know who that teacher is behind the website and the TPT store and this live show, even though you see me. So thank you so much for joining me. I'll get started with telling you who I am. My name is Patty. I am a split grade 4-5 teacher in Ontario, Canada. I have been teaching a split grade for 7 years now. It's been the same grade level for most of those 7 years. So it's been a 4-5 split. And I actually really enjoy teaching a split. And I know that may make me sound a little bit crazy, but I feel as though almost every classroom nowadays is some variation of a split grade classroom. I just happen to have it labeled right there on the door that there are 2 distinct grades in my classroom, even though on paper I probably have about 4 or 5 distinct grade levels of curriculum that I'm covering in my room on a daily basis. And I'm sure many of you have the same thing. I am also a mother of 3 little ones. I have 2 daughters, ages 7 and 5, and a son that's 2, and I teach full time. So life is a little hectic. And I don't think there's probably too many teachers out there that wouldn't use the word hectic to describe what life is like on a regular basis for them, especially as education is changing and there's more and more demands placed on teachers in the classroom. I want to go all the way back to the beginning and kind of let you get to know the motivations behind why I even started Madly Learning and what my purpose is and why I keep showing up every week to really work with and hang out with the community of educators that have already decided to join me. 7 years ago, I was on a maternity leave with my oldest, and feeling my brain melt, I decided to take a bunch of AQ courses, which are additional qualifications courses to kind of up the qualifications on my teaching certificate, because I could feel my brain melting in baby mummy mode. So additional qualifications, here I went. Through some of the research for some of those courses, I actually found a lot of teacher blogs, except the big problem with those teacher blogs was they were fantastic, but they didn't really represent my voice. I didn't see a lot of other sellers that were, or teacher bloggers who were Canadian, or were talking about split grade teaching, or some of the needs that Canadian teachers have that perhaps American teachers do not. And I just found that there was a big kind of gaping hole missing. And so I started to write. It also gave me a creative outlet, some place to share my ideas with others, even if I didn't feel as though anyone was reading. It gave me that creative outlet while I was often outside of the classroom to share that information with others. So I started. Now, I've also been asked many times, where does Madly Learning come from? Well, it's actually a variation of my oldest daughter's name. Her name is Madeline, and the name Madly Learning is essentially derived from her name, Madeline, to Madly, and learning, well, just because we're all a teacher. So nothing fancy or too creative, but that is the origin of the name. So I would just go on my blog, and when I had an idea or I saw something pop up, I would write about it. And I would share some of the things that I was doing in my classroom. People at that point in time in blogs 7 years ago were always leaving comments. And a lot of the comments were, do you have that to share? Or can you share that with me? So then in came Teachers Pay Teachers at that point in my life, where it made it an easy platform to share resources that I was already talking about on my website in a way that I wasn't constantly sharing Google Drive links and making that kind of complicated mess. So it was an easy, straightforward way for me to share information that I was already talking about on my blog with other teachers. Also Teachers Pay Teachers gave me a really creative outlet, because it's something that I really enjoyed always doing, is always having a creative outlet, or making something look pretty, or designing, laying graphic organizers out and what they would look like on a page is something I really like doing. Plus, I always liked all of my pages to match. And it bugged me when I would have worksheets that didn't match, and I couldn't stand the cutting, pasting, and taping that often happens still to this day. I don't know if it happens in your staff room, but still to this day, people are taking worksheets that they're getting from multiple sources, photocopying them, cutting them together, and Frankensteining a worksheet out of it, or Frankensteining an answer page for students or a test. And that drove me crazy when the fonts on the same page didn't work, or I would have my handwriting in there. So I had to come up with a way to do that on the computer. And then because I had already made it, I shared it with other teachers through my website. Jump forward to 2014, and curriculum changed. And the anticipation of going back into the classroom and not having the resources, I was off again on a maternity leave, and I spent some time as other teachers kept asking me, did I have anything for the new curriculum change, or what I was doing to get prepared for the curriculum change. And then I put together some split grade resources. And this is where I really found my very first community of people, because split grade teachers often were left out and didn't have a lot of people supporting them with resources on, or ideas on, how to effectively teach a split grade curriculum when you're looking at two completely separate curriculums. And then you throw in the challenge of having to teach inquiry-based learning all at that same time. And needless to say, 2014 was a year of complete and total overwhelming from a pedagogical standpoint. So I started blogging more, because I had taught a split grade for so long. That wasn't something that I had to really figure out. I could just jump more into inquiry, and I just shared what I was working with other teachers. And this was one of the ways that I met many of you and many other teachers, is through the website, through the communities, through Facebook groups, and sharing ideas and that kind of thing. So I definitely, that is kind of how Madly Learning has come to be. And now I found that live video and talking about teaching practices was one of the easiest ways to answer people's questions and teach them how to implement some of the things that I was sharing on Teachers Pay Teachers and talk about it. So that's kind of where I have come from. So in general, if we were BFFs, there are definitely some things that we would have in common. So if you are somebody who loves coffee, we might be BFFs. If you also enjoy a glass of wine at the end of a week of teaching, we also might be BFFs. Because I love me a good cup of coffee in the morning, and Friday night sitting in front of Netflix with a glass of wine is my idea of a good time. If you think inquiry should lead pedagogically in your classroom, you and I might be teaching BFFs. If you think that student voice and choice should also be a good idea in your classroom, where you are okay with letting go a little bit of that control, or at least you're open to the idea of letting go of some of that control, giving your students some autonomy and allowing their student voice and choice to lead in a lot of your activities, including your final projects and assessments, and you are listening to the ideas of your students, then we might be teaching BFFs. If you think that giving your students opportunities for appropriate feedback, if you think that they also need goals that they work towards, and that these goals are, and feedback cycles and conferencing with your students are something that are going to push learning forward in your classroom, and it's one of the most effective strategies to push learning forward in your classroom, these are some of the things that I find to be effective in my classroom, and kind of they are the basic underlying philosophies that I share and what guides the teaching and learning in my classroom. Do you feel that most students are capable of working independently with the proper supports? And they may need to go back through boot camp every so often, but if you feel as though students are capable of working independently, that is definitely something that I hold firm, that most students are capable of working independently, or some type of independent working, that they don't all need to kind of be under thumb and controlled, teacher controlled at all times. Do you think that technology is essential in today's classrooms? In a 21st century learning environment, technology is important. If you are not somebody that supports technology, well, maybe we would just be friends, but maybe not BFFs. Do you think that the role of the teacher is to guide? So for me, I definitely feel as though the role of the teacher in the classroom is not to lecture or to control all aspects of learning, but to guide and facilitate. I definitely see that as my main role, which has definitely shifted over the last 12 years of my teaching career, because it's not something I necessarily held as a belief at the beginning of my career, but it's something I definitely feel now. Do you feel that failure is a part of learning, and that you embrace failure and teach your students how to fail and give them a soft place to fail? So failure is not scary. Failure is an important part of learning. We can fail small, we can fail big, but failure is a part of learning, and we can celebrate those failures while also learning from those failures, and so that we can perhaps prevent some of the big failures. So failing small and also failing softly is something that I firmly believe we need to teach our students how to persevere, and we need to teach them to be resilient problem solvers, to develop some grit so that they can really learn how to learn from those failures and keep pushing forward, pushing their thinking and moving to the next step in their learning. And like I said before, I also think that every classroom is a split grade classroom because differentiation is key in all of our learning. So not every student in the classroom should be doing the same thing at the same time, because we need to reflect that there are differences in how our students learn. There are differences in what our students are interested in. And I think the ability to differentiate the learning in our classroom so that is responsive to student readiness, responsive to student interest, and responsive to student need is another extremely important part of my approach to teaching and learning. So if you are with me on some of those, then you and I would probably be teaching BFFs. And if that is the case, then I want to get to know you. I want to know who you are as a teacher. And I would invite you to join us in that Madly Learning Insiders Facebook group and introduce yourself, because sometimes I don't get to know all of you as much as I would like to, and really to help build that community. So now that you see my philosophy of teaching, what does that look like in my classroom? On a day-to-day practical walk into my room, what does that philosophy guide the day-to-day learning and practice in my room? So for language, I definitely take an inquiry approach to language arts, as well as in one where students have autonomy and I'm differentiating. Students do not need to all be writing the same thing at the same time. I want students to look at where their strengths as writers are, what their interests are, and what their skill set is at the beginning of the year. And I really want to foster and build the love of writing based on that interest and curiosity, and get students to just write. The best way to become a better writer is to write more. Now, those are not my words. I'm not sure whose words they are, but they're not mine. But I firmly believe that that is the case, especially as you're moving students from primary into junior learning. They just need to learn how to write, to be a writer, and to make mistakes and to grow from those learnings, to fail softly. So their first story might be horrible, but we learn from it and we improve and we get better, and then we make and create something that we can be extremely proud of. So for writing, I embrace ideas of differentiation, student interest and autonomy, as well as allowing students to follow their own choice and express their voice through the writing. I also firmly love picture books and think that they are a nice, quick, easy tie-in to be teaching different social justice issues in my classroom, to look at different writing styles, different forms of writing. And I always have a new picture book every week for students to be looking and learning from. I will take that because I do believe that language should be integrated. It shouldn't feel like silos. We should have a common theme and thread between our shared reading texts, our guided reading texts, our picture books, our writing work, our grammar work. All of those curriculum expectations that we have to cover in language should be integrated and joined together with a common thread or theme. So I like to look at language thematically and having character traits and choosing books that are related to those character traits, and then choosing reading materials through guided and shared reading that are maybe nonfiction paired texts that match a picture book. For example, you may have Malala's Magic Pencil. So you may have this as a fiction story that's based on reality, but a great shared text for this would be to learn more about Malala, or to learn more about other activists that are children that are fighting for rights, or to learn about the importance of women's education or girls' education in third world countries, which is something that we know Malala fights for. So using that picture book as the jumping off point, looking at social justice issues, making sure that I'm representing a variety of cultures, minorities in my classroom through the picture books I use, through all of the stories that are being told, that I'm using a diverse set of picture books. That is how my philosophy of education is tied into what is happening in my classroom. Now, This philosophy has guided some of the materials that I produce for other teachers through Ignited Literacy, which I talked about plenty of times before here on the live show. And Ignited Literacy takes all of those lessons and puts it together in a week-by-week view. So you have your picture book, your shared reading, your guided reading, your grammar activities, spelling activities, student work activities in terms of writing prompts and reading prompts, and embraces inquiry-based learning through your language program. So if you believe in some of the same philosophies of education and what teaching and learning looks like, then Ignited Literacy might be a good fit for your language program in your classroom so that you don't constantly feel like you're pulling from different areas where they're not always connected. In math, my philosophy of education looks and guides my math instruction by looking through the lens of differentiated learning. I want students to understand that learning is on a continuum, and especially math. Math, for a lot of my students, we have gaps, and there's gaps in learning. We've got to cover a lot of curriculum all in 1 year, and we've got to keep moving, keep that train moving constantly if we want to be able to get enough assessment data for those report cards. And it's a challenge because you're constantly balanced between what you know your students need to spend more time on and what you are required to get through to satisfy the curriculum expectations as they are handed to you and the standards that you must cover. So through embracing differentiated learning, I will look at teaching a split grade classroom in math as that train or continuum. And I look at the grades that go before and after and look at the expectations on a continuum. Where do they start the grade before? Where do they end the grade after? And how do I design activities that can allow students multiple entry points into my math instruction so that they could take the same activity and they could simplify it to make it easier for some students who need it simplified. You can make it at grade level for my 4s and at grade level for my 5s, as well as giving opportunities for students to extend. What I don't have time for, because I am a mom of 3 and I am busy, is I don't have time to be planning 2 separate math activities for 2 different grades, plus all of my other students that might be working outside of those standard grades that are already in my classroom. So grade 4 and 5, I don't have time to be planning 6 different separate lessons for all of my students. So what I use is my philosophy of differentiated instruction, where I have a general page, my morning math pages that I use regularly, is I have multiple entry points. If I'm using a number of the day, if I can give some students a simplified number and some students a 2-digit number and some students a 4-digit number and some students a 5-digit number, but yet the same activities can be completed. So I give 1 page to every student and I can differentiate the learning expectations and the work that actually happens on each one of those pages for my students in a way that I can modify, accommodate, and differentiate right there in my classroom, but my prep work is 1 page. And that was something that was really important to me, is how to simplify my planning and prep work time at home so that I didn't have to be planning, because I want to have differentiation. I don't just want to leave those kids on the periphery out in the cold and have them just do the same thing as everyone else. My personal philosophy is that I do need to have multiple entry points for students. So I had to try to figure out how to do that for each one of the strands. So I use differentiated daily math pages on a regular basis in my classroom, whether I'm putting them in a bucket that they're picking up every single morning for bell work, or whether I'm using them through math centers so I can see students in guided math on a regular basis to specifically target some students on different skills. I have activities that have multiple entry points, but cuts my prep work significantly at home because I'm planning once and using it in multiple ways in my classroom. And that's definitely one of my survival strategies as a split grade teacher. Plan once, use it in multiple ways. So that is how my philosophy of education really ties into what math looks like in my classroom. Now, science and social studies. One of the most difficult things to do as a split grade teacher is to try to cover two completely separate expectations, whether it's science or social studies, to two different grade levels at the exact same time. It's not easy. And this is where the majority of my community and my support has been to teachers, is how to integrate inquiry-based learning, which is why show is called Teaching with Inquiry Live, but how to use inquiry-based learning in a split grade when you're covering two completely separate curriculums. For me, the easiest way to do that is to flip-flop instruction. So I will either do one day of grade 4 instruction while the grade 5s are working on an independent task, or I will use a 20-20 model because we have 50-minute periods, built in some transition time where I will spend half of the period with one grade and the other half of the period with the other grade. When I'm working with one of the grades, the other students are working on an independent activity. Now, some of that could just be assembling a booklet and filling out some reflection questions. It could be conducting an experiment that they can do simply and easily without a lot of my support. So I'm not modeling it, but they can do it themselves. Or sometimes it's just a matter of watching a video, or I will also alternatively, because I teach my class for multiple subjects, I will also borrow time and trade off time with other subjects that might have more independent tasks, such as writing. My students are pretty good at writing independently. So when my grade 5s are writing, I can always pull my 4s for a science lesson and then flip-flop their language and science periods to give me a little bit more breathing room to work with my students. Flip-flopping your science instruction definitely helps out. It also helps out in my classroom that I create buckets in the beginning of the year or the beginning of the time of teaching. Is I will create one of those plastic shoe boxes, and inside the shoe boxes I will put all of the materials I need for an experiment, and I put all of the materials in there, and then I use them for that experiment and I put them back. If I can reuse the material, which hopefully I can, most of the experiments I use are things that can be reused, is I really try to keep all of those shoe boxes with experiments. That means that year after year, as I'm continually teaching the same grade, I'm not having to scrounge and pull different materials from different places to run an experiment. I can simply pull out the blood bucket, and we have all of the ingredients that I'm going to need to make blood, model of blood with my students. I've got the salt, I've got the food coloring, I've got the mason jars. It's all there in those shoe boxes. That has definitely saved me some prep time and work in order to quickly have access to experiments in science, is having those buckets. Dawn, thanks so much for the question. I did say in my philosophy, I do think that most students can work independently. Dawn asks, what do you do with behavior students who can't handle independent activities or not having someone watch them all the time? So Dawn, this is a challenge. You will have some students that don't have support. And what do you do with this behavior? This is often a time where there's generally something that they can do that within some time in the curriculum, even if it's just art. Art has been my savior for sometimes being able to flip-flop for language instruction. A lot of students can do art independently. So if I have art back to back with a science period, or just have, instead of doing, I know a lot of teachers like to do 100 minutes of art instruction. If I do 50 minutes of art instruction and do it back to back with science, I can flip-flop with art, and that's a really easy way for those students to be independent. If they really can't be independent, then they work just within arm's reach away from me if I need to, or I will sometimes ask for different supports and I will try to put them onto some behavior plans or some other things. I have had some behavior, not volatile behavior students Those aren't the ones, you're afraid that you're going to clear the classroom. Those you're going to have to plan for a little bit differently. But students that have perhaps severe ADHD or hard time focusing, those students are you're really going to have to look at their strength. I find art is a saving grace. So is writing once they get really into it, especially if they're able to use technology and write on an iPad. Then often that is something they can do independently while I'm working with the other grade. I just try to look at those students in particular, what subject their strength is and where they can sustain some independent work, and then where I can flip-flop with that instruction. If it's absolutely over the top, if I can't get support for that student, in all honesty, I might just combine both grades and do what I can and kind of teach both of the lessons together to both of the grades and then let them go. We'll see. I'm sure I have a few that might be coming up, and I will talk to you about that maybe in a couple of years. But I would say really look at those behavior plans and find what subject it is that is their strength, and that's the one you want to flip-flop for those students. For sure. That's the hard one. So science and social studies, I find there's a tremendous amount of reading. If I'm using technology and using Google Read and Write and using Google Classroom to make sure that those activities are in place, then students can be working on those and using the assistive technology, have something listening to them. They're watching a video when they're not with me. And it's really strong about training and getting your students to really train and sustain independent work and knowing how long that independent work might be. If it's only 10 minutes, then you're flip-flopping multiple times, and you really have to be responsive to students. In the 7 years I've had a split, I've maybe only had 2 or 3 students that did struggle significantly with independent work, and we were able to find supports to put in place for those that included other adults or other student supports that could be put in place to help them through those difficult times. So that is my thought there. So with those 3 core subjects, the philosophy of education definitely drives how I teach those 4 subject areas in my classroom. It is how I have designed the things that I sell on Teachers Pay Teachers. It's what I talk about. It's what I teach teachers how to do every Monday nights at 9. The philosophy that I have on education really drives all of those things. Now, it may not be you. And I may not be the person that is here to support you. It might be somebody else, and that's okay. We can still be friends. We just may not be best friends forever, best teaching friends forever, and that's fine. If you are somebody who thinks that these different programs are my philosophy education matches your philosophy education, and you are interested in saving yourself some time so that you're not spending all of your time planning and you can enjoy your summer and your March break that's coming up so soon, I encourage you to go to Teachers Pay Teachers tomorrow. They have their spring sale tomorrow. Now, they only have this sale 4 times a year, and the sale will give you up to 20% off. So I put my stuff on sale for 20%. TPT matches, and not matches, TPT gives an additional 5% off. So you get 25% off absolutely everything in my store, including those big, large, growing bundles for extended literacy, for my science and social studies for grade 4 and 5, as well as for my morning math pages. All of those enormous bundles are on sale for 25% off. The next time these will be on sale traditionally won't be until back to school. So they don't go back on sale until August. So if you need something for this year, this is the sale to get it. So if you've been going term 1 and busting it and killing yourself making stuff and you're looking to save yourself some time, then you can go to TPT tomorrow and get the enormous 25% off that only happens 4 times a year. And you can find anything in my TPT store for sale for 25% sorry, they want us to say up to 25% off. But all my stuff is up 25% off. So it's all good. 25% off of everything. You need to remember, though, to get that additional 5% that TPT offers. The 20% I offer is free and clear. You get that automatically. The extra 5% from TPT only happens when you enter in the code, which is TikTok. So TikTok is the code that you need to enter, and the sale is tomorrow, February 26th and 27th, which is the Tuesday. Oh, it's tomorrow and Wednesday. Yeah, it's 2 days. So you've got 2 days to do it. 2 days to fill your carts. Don't forget that if you've made huge purchases, leave feedback on those resources. I know that there's a lot of you that have purchased some of my products, especially some of my larger products, and have not yet left feedback. When you leave feedback, you get TPT purchase credits, which means TPT will take money off future purchases, which is fantastic. And you can get some significant savings if you've purchased larger bundles when you leave feedback. So if you've already purchased something from my TPT store and you have not yet left feedback, I would absolutely love it if you felt inclined to go on and let me know what you liked about the products that I sell there. So if you are eyeballing something special over there on TPT, you can head over there. Not tonight. Wait until, or unless you want to do midnight. I think go on sale midnight. But they are on sale Tuesday and Wednesday, February 26th and 27th, 25% off. Don't forget the code TikTok, and you will enter that promo code in the sidebar when you check out, and you can get your hands on all of the many amazing, innovative things on Teachers Pay Teachers for sale. Also, stay tuned for later this evening. I believe there is a contest brewing between myself and a few other Canadian TPTers to be getting out some gift cards for you as well. So stay tuned to my Facebook and Instagram page for more information on that giveaway. So thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait for you to tell me all about your philosophy of education and what teaching and learning looks like in your class. I would love to get to know more of you in those Facebook groups so that we can really build a strong and supportive community where teaching and learning becomes this amazing journey that we all take together. So thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I will see you next Monday right here, Mondays at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time for another episode of Teaching with Inquiry Live. Bye for now.